I think Monday's episode is shaping up to be one of those classic Days of Our Lives hours where almost every storyline feels like it's sitting on the edge of disaster. What really stood out to me is how everyone seems to be making emotional decisions instead of smart ones, and in Salem, that usually ends badly. At the center of the chaos is Days of Our Lives and the dangerous alliance brewing between Kristen DiMera and Xander Kyriakis. Kristen pushing Xander to kill EJ DiMera honestly feels like the kind of reckless DiMera plotting that never stays secret for long. The kiss and seduction angle almost feels secondary because Kristen clearly knows Xander's real weakness isn't romance, it's fear. He's terrified of losing Victoria Kyriakis and ruining his chance to be a real father. To me, that's what makes this story interesting. A few years ago, Xander probably would have jumped into a revenge scheme without hesitation. Now he pauses, he calculates, he actually thinks about consequences. That doesn't necessarily make him safe, though. In fact, it may make him even more dangerous, because if he eventually says yes, it'll be a deliberate choice rather than an impulsive one. I was also wondering if Kristen is overplaying her hand here. She's acting like eliminating EJ solves everything, but Salem murders rarely stay buried. Plus, Kristen tends to underestimate how quickly situations spiral out of control once emotions get involved. If Xander does entertain this deal, he'll likely demand something massive in return: protection, leverage, or maybe information powerful enough to secure his future with Victoria permanently. Meanwhile, Gwen Rizchek confiding in Leo Stark feels very on brand for both characters. Gwen pretending she's okay with casual was never going to last. I think she genuinely believed she could keep emotions out of it, but Xander has become the one person she can't fully detach from emotionally. Leo will probably encourage the drama instead of calming it down, because that's usually where he thrives. Another emotional complication is growing between Brady Black and Sarah Horton. Brady stepping up for Sarah may seem innocent on the surface, but soap operas rarely build emotional intimacy without a bigger payoff coming later. I think Sarah falling harder for Brady could create a serious triangle if Xander's darker impulses continue pulling him in another direction. The storyline I'm most curious about, though, might actually be Stephanie Kyriakis and Alex Kyriakis. Stephanie admitting she's uncertain about their future because of the stepmom issue feels surprisingly realistic for a soap. Instead of over-the-top betrayal or instant cheating, this conflict comes from fear about responsibility and whether she's emotionally prepared for the life Alex wants. Those quieter relationship struggles sometimes hit harder than the wild murder plots. Then there's Paulina Price, carrying the emotional weight of nearly every family crisis at once. Between worries about Abe Carver, concern over Lexi Carver, and fear surrounding Chanel Dupree DiMera and her biopsy results, it feels like Paulina is heading toward emotional exhaustion. Chanel trying to downplay the situation almost makes it sadder because everyone around her clearly knows the possibility of bad news is real. I may be wrong, but this episode feels less like setup and more like the beginning of several explosions waiting to happen. Xander's decision alone could shift half the canvas, depending on whether he walks away from Kristen's offer or decides EJ really is better off gone. I think the Days of Our Lives preview for May 18th to 22nd feels packed with emotional fallout, old memories, and the kind of messy betrayals this show always does best. The biggest shock to me is definitely Philip Kyriakis completely losing it after learning what Gabby Hernandez has been hiding from him for months. From the way the promo is edited, it looks like Gabby finally confesses her role in helping Tony DiMera sabotage the Titan DiMera merger. I was wondering how long the show could realistically keep that secret buried, because Philip's reaction is exactly as explosive as you'd expect. The moment he tells her to pack her things and get out of the Kyriakis mansion feels less like a temporary lovers' fight and more like a complete breaking point. To me, Philip has always had trust issues simmering underneath the surface. So discovering that Gabby betrayed both him and Titan probably hits him on multiple levels at once, personally, emotionally, and professionally. I may be wrong, but this feels like one of those moments that could permanently change their relationship instead of leading to another quick soap reunion a few weeks later. Meanwhile, Kristen DiMera appears to be operating in full manipulative mode again. The promo teasing Kristen kissing Xander Kyriakis while trying to convince him to kill EJ DiMera honestly feels very classic Kristen. Dangerous schemes mixed with seduction and desperation. I didn't realize until recently just how deeply Kristen's hatred toward EJ has been building again. She clearly wants revenge badly enough to drag Xander into something irreversible. The interesting part is whether Xander is actually tempted or whether Kristen is overestimating her influence over him. Knowing Days, even entertaining the idea could spiral into a disaster involving multiple families. Another emotional layer in the promo centers on Paulina Price shocking Abe Carver with the announcement that she's moving out. That scene feels quieter than the others, but maybe more heartbreaking because of it. It sounds like Paulina believes stepping aside could help Lexi Carver somehow reconnect with family or reclaim space in Abe's life. I think the writers are leaning heavily into sacrifice and family loyalty here, which fits the overall tone of the week. Almost every storyline in the preview revolves around somebody feeling betrayed, guilty, or forced to make a painful choice. Then there's the nostalgic side of the episode with Kayla Johnson and Steve Johnson. The show, revisiting nearly 40 years of their romance, honestly feels like a love letter to longtime viewers and to Mary Beth Evans' history on the series. To me, Stella has always represented one of the most enduring relationships in daytime television. Even viewers who stopped watching years ago usually recognize Steve and Kayla instantly. Bringing flashbacks into such a chaotic week may be the show's way of balancing all the betrayals and revenge plots with something genuinely heartfelt. The Gwen Rizchek and Jack Devereaux scenes also caught my attention because there's clearly unfinished emotional business there. Whenever Jack unexpectedly shows up, it usually means family drama, secrets, or guilt are about to surface. I'm curious whether this storyline becomes more emotional than fans expect. Overall, I think this preview promises one of those classic Days of Our Lives weeks, where nearly every storyline collides with either betrayal or redemption. Philip and Gabby's relationship may be heading toward total collapse. Kristen's revenge plan could explode in everyone's face, and the emotional tribute to Steve and Kayla might end up being the real heart of the week. I think this latest Days of Our Lives preview is doing something the show does best, mixing emotional family drama with absolute chaos in Salem. On one side, there's celebration and romance, and on the other, relationships are quietly falling apart before anyone even realizes it. The sweetest part of the preview to me is definitely Steve and Kayla celebrating their life together. After everything those two have survived over the years, seeing them get a peaceful moment with Stephanie almost feels rare in Salem. And then suddenly Jack returns, which immediately changes the mood. Gwen's reaction says a lot. I was wondering if she expected him to come back specifically for her, because the look on her face feels more hurt than happy. But knowing Jack, this could easily tie into Chad and the kids instead of a heartfelt father-daughter reunion. That tension already feels uncomfortable before they even say much to each other. Then there's Paulina and Abe, and honestly, this storyline may be more serious than the preview lets on. With Lexi suddenly back from the dead thanks to EJ's secret revival project, the fact that Paulina knew about it earlier makes everything messy. Abe has always valued honesty, and I think secrets hit harder for him than almost anyone. So when Paulina says she's moving out, it doesn't feel like one of those temporary soap opera arguments. It actually sounds like a real fracture in their marriage. Maybe I'm wrong, but this feels less dramatic and more emotionally heavy. Meanwhile, Philip throwing Gabby out caught my attention immediately because it feels overdue. Gabby has been maneuvering everybody for months, trying to secure her piece of the Demera power and inheritance. She promised Philip they'd split whatever she gained, but I don't think Philip ever fully trusted her. The preview almost makes it look like he's finally connecting all the dots about her schemes. And honestly, Salem's secrets always stay hidden way longer than they realistically should. Joy trying to reconnect with Chanel also says a lot about where she is emotionally right now. She seems isolated. But Chanel clearly has bigger concerns after her biopsy, and I actually liked that Lonnie stepped in protectively. Those sister moments tend to ground the show when everything else gets wild. And then there's the Kristen and Xander situation, which might be the most bizarrely entertaining thing in the entire preview. Kristen asking Xander to kill EJ is already insane enough, but the fact she appears to be seducing him while pitching the idea somehow makes it even more unhinged. I honestly can't tell whether Kristen truly believes charm will convince Xander, or if she knows he already hates EJ enough that she barely needs to try. Either way, the chemistry in those scenes looks chaotic in exactly the way Days loves. What really stands out to me overall is how many relationships suddenly feel unstable at the same time. Steve and Kayla are celebrating endurance, while Paulina and Abe may be collapsing. Philip and Gabby are imploding, and Kristen is weaponizing flirtation for attempted murder negotiations. That balance of heartfelt emotion and complete absurdity is basically Salem in one preview. I think Days of Our Lives may have finally pushed its resurrection obsession to the point where the show itself is questioning whether it still works. For years, Salem has operated under an unspoken agreement with viewers. Death rarely sticks, but there's usually an explanation attached to it. Someone faked their death. Someone survived secretly. Or Dr. Rolfe dragged them back from the brink before they were fully gone. Ridiculous? Absolutely. But there was still at least a technicality involved. Lexi changes that. According to EJ, Lexi was truly dead. Not frozen, not hidden away, not secretly recovering somewhere off screen. Dead for 14 years. And Friday's conversation between Kristen and Chad felt less like ordinary soap dialogue and more like the writers openly acknowledging the problem they've created. If death isn't permanent, Kristen wondered, then what does that say about life? That line honestly felt like the show staring directly into the mirror, because Chad immediately followed it with the real emotional consequence. Grief and moving on stop mattering too. And I think that's exactly why this storyline has felt so strange from the beginning. The emotional stakes collapse when audiences are conditioned to believe every death comes with an expiration date. Why mourn anyone in Salem anymore? Why invest in heartbreak, closure, or growth when viewers are already waiting for the inevitable resurrection arc? That's the danger Days has drifted into over the years. Death used to be a storytelling earthquake. Now it's become a revolving door with elevator music playing in the background. And the wildest part is how casual everyone seems about Lexi returning. Fans noticed it immediately. The reactions on screen have been oddly muted, almost like nobody can even pretend to be shocked anymore. To me, that feels intentional. The show seems almost self-aware about how meaningless death has become in Salem, and instead of avoiding the criticism, it's leaning directly into it. They've taken the concept to its absolute extreme, literal resurrection, and now they're practically daring viewers to ask whether this has all gone too far. Which is why I don't think this storyline ends with EJ successfully conquering death forever. I may be wrong, but the more the show emphasizes the moral consequences of playing God, the more it feels like this is setting up a rejection of the entire resurrection era. Lexi probably isn't staying. Something almost has to fail. The drug, the science, the black market operation. Whatever EJ and Rolf are building likely collapses under its own ambition. And if that happens, then this entire arc suddenly transforms into something much bigger than just another crazy soap twist. It becomes Days of Our Lives putting Stefano DiMera's legacy on trial. Kristen's perspective is what really stood out to me. Usually, the DiMeras are the first people embracing power at any cost. But here, Kristen is essentially arguing that resurrection should have died with Stefano. That line felt important. The show already gave Stefano a final farewell, and now this storyline almost feels like the last toxic echo of his influence lingering over Salem. One final attempt to defeat death itself. One final temptation. And maybe one final disaster before the show finally closes the door on miracle resurrections altogether. Because honestly, if Days wants death to matter again, this may be the only way to do it. The audience has to believe there are limits. Otherwise, every funeral becomes temporary, every tragedy becomes negotiable, and every emotional goodbye loses weight before it even happens. I didn't realize until this storyline just how close the show had gotten to breaking one of soap opera's most important illusions, that loss still matters, even in a world full of chaos. Maybe this Lexi arc is the show recognizing that too. I think this Days of Our Lives preview for May 18th to 22nd, 2026 is setting up a really emotional contrast between couples who are surviving the chaos of Salem and couples who are completely falling apart. To me, the writers are clearly leaning into the idea that love can either anchor people or destroy everything around them. The strongest emotional material in this preview easily belongs to Days of Our Lives legends Steve and Kayla. Their scenes feel nostalgic in the best possible way. The flashbacks to their younger years, especially moments with baby Stephanie, seem designed to remind viewers why Stella has lasted through decades of drama, danger, deaths, and impossible reunions. When Steve asks Kayla if she's ready for another adventure, it doesn't even sound like a simple romantic line. I was wondering if the show is quietly hinting at a major storyline ahead for them, maybe something involving family, travel, or even another medical crisis. But the important thing is that they're facing it together. In Salem, that alone is rare. Meanwhile, Abe and Paulina's scenes feel heartbreaking because there's no screaming or betrayal attached to them. Paulina deciding to move out after Lexi's shocking return almost feels self-sacrificial. She's giving Abe the freedom to reconnect with a woman he once lost forever. And honestly, that makes the moment more painful. Abe's stunned reaction says everything. He clearly didn't expect Paulina to walk away so gracefully. I think the Lexi resurrection twist is classic Days insanity, the kind of soap opera storytelling that's either wildly emotional or completely unbelievable depending on your mood that day. But maybe that's exactly why longtime fans love this show. Nobody stays gone forever in Salem. Then there's Lonnie and Joy discussing Chanel, and this feels like quieter setup material for something bigger. Lonnie warning Joy to give Chanel some space immediately made me think Chanel is heading toward emotional overload. Usually when characters start talking this carefully around someone on a soap, an explosion isn't far behind. The return of Jack is another major moment. Seeing him show up unexpectedly for Gwen could go in several directions. Gwen asking, "Why are you here?" already tells you there's unresolved hurt between them. I didn't realize how much unfinished family tension still exists there until this preview brought them back together again. Jack's returns usually come with emotional fallout, guilt, or attempts at reconciliation, so I think this storyline could become surprisingly personal. The biggest collapse this week, though, may belong to Philip and Gabby. His ultimatum sounds final, angry, and deeply personal. Telling her to pack your things and get the hell out doesn't sound like a temporary lover's fight. It sounds like someone who feels completely betrayed. To me, the interesting part is that Philip says he's done, but in soaps, characters who declare they're done are usually the least emotionally finished. Those are often the couples that circle back into even messier territory later. And then there's Kristen kissing Xander, which honestly feels like the wild card move of the entire preview. I may be wrong, but this pairing has chaos written all over it. Kristen is unpredictable, manipulative, emotional, and relentless when she wants something. Xander, meanwhile, tends to operate on impulse and emotional vulnerability. That combination could either become strangely entertaining or completely catastrophic for everyone around them. What makes the kiss especially interesting is how unexpected it feels. The show clearly wants viewers to ask, wait, why these two? And sometimes those bizarre soap pairings end up becoming fan favorites because they're so dangerous together. Overall, I think this week's preview is less about shocking twists and more about emotional shifts. Some relationships are evolving into something deeper, while others are quietly collapsing in ways that may not be reversible. And in true Salem fashion, every romantic decision seems ready to trigger another disaster. I think Kristen DiMera is getting pushed closer and closer to a complete breakdown, and the Sophia situation may finally be the thing that destroys the control she's been desperately trying to hold on to. What makes this storyline work for me is that Kristen isn't just hiding a crime anymore. She's being psychologically crushed by it. The moment Kristen decided Sophia Choi had become a liability, everything changed. At first, she thought she could manipulate the situation, like she always does. She offered Sophia a fake escape plan, promised her a passport, money, and a new life after targeting Johnny DiMera. But once Sophia actually showed up after the attempted shooting, Kristen realized she had created a dangerous witness she could never fully trust. To me, that's when the panic really started. Sophia wasn't predictable. She had already dragged Rachel Black into her schemes by using her to move drugs to Holly Jonas, and Kristen knew Sophia could expose absolutely everything if she felt cornered. That's why Kristen resorted to violence. The rock attack and the river cover-up felt less like a calculated DiMera master plan and more like a desperate act from someone spiraling out of control. Now the guilt, or maybe paranoia, is eating her alive. I find it interesting that Sophia's ghost keeps appearing in places tied to Kristen's power and security, especially the DiMera mansion and gardens. Those are spaces where Kristen usually feels untouchable. Instead, she's terrified. Her screaming at visions of Sophia while Dr. Rolfe walked in almost felt like the show intentionally teasing that Kristen's grip on reality is slipping faster than she realizes. Bayview could become the perfect storm for her collapse. Kristen already has emotional baggage tied to that place because Rachel was sent there after confessing to shooting E.J. DiMera. Walking into Bayview to tell her daughter that Sophia supposedly committed suicide is already dark enough. But if Sophia's ghost appears during that conversation, I can absolutely see Kristen unraveling in front of Rachel. Imagine Kristen trying to calmly explain the fake suicide story while hallucinating Sophia standing beside Rachel, mocking every lie she tells. I was wondering if the show might even have Sophia verbally challenge Kristen in those scenes, forcing Kristen to react out loud without realizing it. That would make the situation terrifying for Rachel, especially if she witnesses her mother screaming at someone nobody else can see. And honestly, Bayview is the one place where Kristen completely losing control would have consequences immediately. At the mansion, Brady Black, or Dr. Rolfe, might dismiss her behavior as stress. Inside a psychiatric facility, though, doctors and staff would instantly recognize a mental health crisis. There's also poetic irony in Kristen ending up institutionalized beside Rachel. Kristen has spent so much time manipulating everyone around her, covering crimes and escaping punishment through intimidation or family influence. But this time, the punishment may not come from the law. It may come from her own mind turning against her. I may be wrong, but I don't think Sophia's ghost is meant to be supernatural. It feels more like Days of Our Lives using guilt as a horror element. Sophia represents the truth Kristen buried, literally and emotionally. And the more Kristen lies, the stronger those visions become. The big question is whether Kristen eventually confesses or completely snaps first. If the writers really want maximum drama, Rachel could become the catalyst. Kristen loves her daughter more fiercely than almost anyone else in her life. So if Sophia's hallucinations start pressuring Kristen to tell Rachel the truth, Kristen may finally break under the weight of protecting herself versus protecting her child. And if Rachel sees even part of that breakdown, it could permanently change how she sees her mother. That might hurt Kristen more than prison ever could. I think Monday's episode is shaping up to be one of those classic Days of Our Lives episodes, where almost every storyline feels like it's quietly building toward disaster. On the surface, people are having conversations, making promises, and trying to stay calm. But underneath it all, there's panic, resentment, and desperation brewing all over Salem. The biggest wild card to me is definitely Kristen DiMera approaching Xander Kyriakis with a proposal. Xander is in survival mode right now, and when this character gets cornered financially or emotionally, he tends to make reckless decisions first and think later. Titan collapsing isn't just business trouble for him. It's personal pride, identity, and legacy all wrapped together. What really stands out is the ominous question hanging over the storyline. How far would Xander actually go to save Titan? I was wondering if the show is intentionally teasing a darker turn here. Whenever Kristen gets involved in someone's crisis, there's usually a catch, and it's rarely something small or harmless. To me, this feels less like a business arrangement and more like the beginning of a dangerous alliance. Meanwhile, the situation with Sarah Horton and Brady Black continues to get more complicated emotionally. Their romance still feels unexpected in a way, but Brady throwing himself into making Sarah happy tracks with his personality. He always seems drawn to women who are emotionally wounded or navigating chaos. The timing is what makes this storyline especially messy, considering Sarah's unresolved history with Xander. And honestly, I don't think Gwen Rizchek venting to Leo Stark is random at all. Even when these two clash, they somehow circle back to each other because both thrive on gossip, emotional messiness, and shared grudges. Old friendships in Salem never really die. They just become temporarily hostile. I have a feeling Xander absolutely will be at the center of Gwen's frustrations. Gwen has never fully detached emotionally from him, even when she pretends otherwise. That unresolved bitterness tends to come out whenever she feels isolated. The storyline I find the most emotionally honest right now is probably Stephanie Johnson struggling with Joy Wesley and baby Kelsey entering the picture. Stephanie admitting resentment to Alex Kyriakis may sound harsh, but I actually think it's more believable than pretending she's instantly comfortable with everything. Soap operas sometimes rush characters into being endlessly understanding, but real emotional adjustment takes time. Stephanie's reaction feels messy, flawed, and human. I don't necessarily think she hates the child. To me, it's more about what the baby represents: sudden change, insecurity, and fear that her relationship could shift permanently. Then there's Chanel DiMera, trying to minimize her biopsy to Paulina Price, and this storyline already feels heartbreaking. Chanel clearly doesn't want to burden her mother before she has answers, but Salem history tells us secrets like this almost never stay contained for long. A biopsy is serious no matter how calm someone tries to appear, and I think Chanel's instinct to protect Paulina emotionally may actually backfire. Paulina tends to sense when something is wrong, especially involving her family. If she realizes Chanel is hiding fear behind reassurance, it could make the situation even more painful. Overall, Monday's episode looks less like a calm setup hour and more like the emotional beginning of several explosions waiting to happen. Every storyline seems to revolve around characters trying to maintain control while quietly unraveling underneath. I think the week of May 18th to 22nd on Days of Our Lives feels like classic sweeps storytelling. Emotional fallout, romantic confusion, family nostalgia, and just enough betrayal to shake up almost every major couple in Salem. The biggest emotional punch, to me, is clearly coming from Gabby and Philip. After spending so long hiding the truth about the forged Victor letter, Gabby finally pays the price for all those half-confessions and hesitation. What makes this fallout interesting is that she genuinely tried to tell Philip several times, but every opportunity slipped away or she backed out at the last second. Now it may be too late. When Philip publicly explodes at Gabby in Horton Town Square and throws her out of the DiMera mansion, it feels less like calculated revenge and more like raw humiliation and heartbreak. I was wondering if the show might use this moment to fully isolate Gabby again, because she tends to spiral when both romance and power collapse at the same time. Philip's reaction also suggests he feels manipulated not only romantically, but professionally and personally by the DiMera web surrounding him. At the same time, Steve and Kayla's anniversary material looks like the emotional centerpiece of the week. Seeing flashbacks from the 1980s, especially moments tied to Stephanie's birth and their long history together, feels designed to remind viewers why they remain one of Salem's most enduring couples. I think the contrast is intentional. While younger relationships implode around them, Steve and Kayla represent stability earned through decades of pain and reconciliation. But even during their celebration, Stephanie's problems hang over everything. Her marriage to Alex already seems strained thanks to Joy Wesley returning with Alex's baby. That situation alone would be explosive, but the added emotional history between Joy and Chanel makes things even messier. What stands out to me is that Joy does not appear to be returning as a pure villain. She seems genuinely interested in making peace, especially with Chanel. Lonnie advising Joy to give Chanel space suggests the show may avoid turning this into non-stop catfighting drama, and instead focus more on emotional accountability and complicated co-parenting dynamics. Meanwhile, Xander continues drifting toward chaos. His arrangement with Gwen already looked unstable, but Kristen pulling him into an EJ murder plot pushes things into dangerous territory fast. The kiss between Kristen and Xander definitely feels like the beginning of another reckless spiral for him. I may be wrong, but I don't think Gwen will tolerate being treated like an afterthought for very long, especially now that Jack unexpectedly arrives at her hotel door. That surprise reunion between Gwen and Jack could end up being one of the week's quieter but strongest scenes. Their estrangement has lingered for years, and Jack showing up voluntarily suggests he may finally be ready to repair the damage between them. Gwen often hides vulnerability behind sarcasm and manipulation, so I think seeing her emotionally disarmed by her father could reveal a softer side the audience rarely gets to see. Overall, this preview feels heavily focused on consequences. Secrets are surfacing, families are reconnecting, and several relationships may be reaching irreversible turning points. At the same time, the Steve and Kayla material adds warmth and nostalgia that balances all the heartbreak happening elsewhere in Salem. I think what makes this Days of Our Lives storyline so messy and fascinating is that Sophia Choi's apparent suicide isn't really a simple one villain did one bad thing situation. The obvious answer is Kristen DiMera, because she literally smashed Sophia in the head with a rock and had her thrown off the bridge. That's the final act. But to me, the writers are clearly building a layered chain of manipulation, bad parenting, revenge, fear, and emotional damage, where almost everybody involved helped push Sophia toward disaster in one way or another. The biggest mistake Sophia made was trusting Kristen. And honestly, I don't think Sophia ever fully trusted her. She was terrified of Kristen from the beginning after using Rachel Black as a drug mule. Sophia already knew Kristen was dangerous. But Kristen is manipulative in that classic DiMera way, where she doesn't come at people directly at first. She makes them feel understood. She offers them a solution. Kristen basically reframed Sophia's panic into an opportunity for revenge. She convinced Sophia there was another path forward besides arrest, exposure, or humiliation. Kristen acted like she could forgive Sophia for involving Rachel because her real focus was EJ DiMera. And in Kristen's mind, everything circles back to EJ supposedly ruining Rachel Black's life. That's where this gets psychologically twisted. Kristen genuinely seems to believe EJ is responsible for Rachel shooting him because he hid Rachel Blake away before the adoption hearing. But I was thinking while watching this that Kristen ignores her own role in creating that chaos. EJ only hid Rachel Sr. because Kristen's schemes were unraveling and testimony threatened the entire situation. The irony is, Kristen blames everyone else for the consequences of behavior she helped create. And honestly, little Rachel is almost becoming a reflection of Kristen herself. The kid has grown up, surrounded by manipulation, cover-ups, emotional blackmail, and revenge plots. So when Rachel spirals, Kristen somehow still acts shocked by it. Then Kristen weaponized Sophia's anger. She knew Sophia already had strong resentment toward Johnny DiMera because of the adoption fallout, so Kristen built the whole revenge plan around that existing anger. The note that followed was particularly disturbing, as it shifted the blame toward Holly Jonas and framed it as cyberbullying, almost as if Kristen intended for the fallout to create multiple victims from the situation. What really stood out to me was that Kristen didn't just help Sophia fake a disappearance. She psychologically coached her through constructing a false narrative. Write the note, leave it where your family will find it. Make people believe you were broken. That's incredibly sinister, because Kristen was already planning Sophia's death before Sophia even realized it. And then comes the Johnny attack, which honestly showed how unstable and desperate Sophia had become. Kristen's original plan was brutal but simple. Shoot Johnny and disappear. Instead, Sophia escalated it into this elaborate science project death trap. I actually think that detail matters because it shows Sophia wasn't just acting out revenge anymore. She was unraveling mentally under pressure. The mace, the pistol whipping, tying Johnny up, setting the gas leak with the candle. It all felt frantic and over-engineered, like somebody losing control while trying to feel intelligent and powerful. Luckily, Javi Hernandez saved Johnny before the apartment exploded, because otherwise this story would have crossed into an even darker territory. But to me, the bridge scene is where the storyline finally reveals Kristen's true intentions. Sophia still thought she was part of a deal. She believed Kristen would give her the fake ID, passport, and money so she could disappear and start over somewhere else. Even after everything Sophia had done, she still imagined there was a future waiting for her. That's what makes the betrayal brutal. Kristen calmly instructed her to leave fingerprints on the railing, abandon her belongings, toss her shoes, all details designed to sell the suicide narrative. Sophia probably thought Kristen was helping cover her tracks. Instead, Kristen was staging a murder scene. And the moment Sophia turned her back, Kristen eliminated her like she was loose evidence. That's the horrifying part to me. Sophia thought she was becoming Kristen's accomplice, but Kristen never saw her as a partner. Sophia was disposable from the start. I also think the storyline quietly asks whether Sophia was already doomed long before the bridge. Once she agreed to Kristen's plan, wrote the suicide note, attacked Johnny, and tried to fake her death, there may never have been a realistic path back to normal life for her. Kristen simply became the final predator waiting at the end of a road Sophia had already stepped onto. Still, if we're asking who ultimately carries the greatest blame, I think it absolutely comes back to Kristen DiMera. She manipulated a frightened teenager, exploited her emotional instability, armed her, orchestrated attempted murder, fabricated a suicide narrative, and then committed outright murder herself. Everybody else may have contributed to the toxic environment surrounding Sophia, but Kristen is the one who turned that chaos into a calculated execution.